Good afternoon. I'm Olympia Mayor Cheryl Selby, and on behalf of the Olympia City Council, I'd like to welcome you to the City of Olympia's virtual town hall series on racial justice. This is the last of our 4 weeks. This is the last of our 4 town halls, and today's topic is racial justice in the education system. Over the last 4 weeks, we've held 3 other town halls. The first on racial justice as it relates to the justice system, and the second on economic opportunity, and last week, racial justice in the healthcare system. If you missed any of these, you can still watch them on our website on the Town Hall tab. We're pleased to have had over 500 attendees and to have received over 150 questions. I want to acknowledge the limitations we have due to COVID restrictions on meeting size, that we're not able to meet face-to-face, where we could handle more questions and accommodate small group dialogue. We look forward to that time, hopefully this fall, if everyone washes their hands, wears their masks. We're hoping that we can begin community meetings to scope the work of a new committee that will advise council on issues of diversity, equity, and justice. I want to assure you that we will log all of the questions in consideration of the work ahead for this city council and staff. At this time, I'd like to introduce my council members that are in attendance. I've got Council Member Clark Gilman. You want to wave, Clark? All right. I've got Council Member Lisa Parsley. Want to give a wave? There you are. My Mayor Pro Tem, Jessica Bateman. Council Member Danny Madrone. And Council Member Renata Rollins. Hey, everybody. We actually get to meet this Saturday for the first time since March 17th for our biannual retreat. So looking forward to seeing you all soon. So for today, we have almost 200 people pre-registered, and I want to acknowledge that we have leaders listening in from across many nonprofit groups. We also have elected officials, both current and former, and and then I'm looking at this list, and also current and retired staff from the City of Olympia. We also have listeners from the state of Washington, Thurston County, and leaders from other neighboring cities. So these town halls are getting a lot of regional attention. I also see many folks on the attendee list that work in and with our local education system. And I want to acknowledge that each of these folks have been working overtime to grapple with the real-time effects of the COVID crisis on the educational welfare of students across the system. So thank you for taking time to attend and listen in this afternoon. We will definitely need everyone's leadership across many sectors of our community to recover after COVID in a way that brings everybody access to the tools necessary to maintain educational levels and progress forward. It's important that we remind viewers that the goal of these town halls is to provide a safe gathering space for the community to learn and understand the issues at the center of institutional racism and the opportunities for positive change driven by the Black Lives Matter movement. At this time, I'd like to ask my council mates to mute and turn off their video so we can center the voices of our moderator and panelists. And it's now my pleasure to introduce the brain trust behind these town hall series, these series of town halls, and that's our moderator as well for today, our Strategic Communications Director, Kelly Purce Brosseth. And Kelly will introduce our esteemed panelists for today and go over the town hall format for our viewers. Take it away, Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor Selby and council members. As again, this is my last time to thank you for your trust and for your support as we put these out to the community, and they've been really well received, and I'm continually to be grateful to you guys for your support in this idea. So I want to first of all acknowledge our esteemed panelists. I'm very excited about this panel, we have before you Parfait Bassale. He is the Chief Diversity Officer from South Puget Sound Community College. Fernell Miller, she is the founder and CEO of The Root of Us. Dr. Thelma Jackson. She is the co-founder of the Black Alliance of Thurston County, and Dr. Thomas Les Purce. He is President Emeritus of the Evergreen State College. I will introduce them all each more fully later, but first I want to say to you guys, thank you so much for coming and being a part of this conversation, for saying yes to the city's request. As you know, I've talked to all of you about these issues in some form over the past few weeks, and you know, I'm impressed with you all. Some of you I know better than others, and it's been great getting to know you. For the audience, I want you to know that this event is going to run up to 90 minutes. We're going to hear briefly from each of the panelists, and it'll be followed by Q&A where you as attendees can submit questions. I want to remind you that the town hall is being recorded and will be posted on the city's website within a few days after, usually up by Friday afternoon, but possibly Monday, depending on technical difficulties. Like the other town halls that you've attended, this town hall will also be a conversation about a hard topic. And our panelists are experts in this field, and they bring their experience and they bring their honesty to the table. So I'll again not warn you, but let you know that you should not be surprised if there are points in this conversation where you might feel a little uncomfortable. That you might hear things that don't jive with your worldview or challenge your perspective. And I just want you to know that that's important in this conversation and in this moment in our country. And I applaud you for showing up for this and for your willingness to listen this afternoon and across this whole series. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Parfait Bassale. He is a true catalyst for change. He continues to work tirelessly to promote understanding across communities. He is a father, a husband, an artist, and an educator. He facilitates transformation and restoration through keynote speeches, workshops, and training. He is the newly appointed Executive Diversity Officer at South Puget Sound Community College here in Olympia, where he is leading the college's efforts to close the achievement gap for historically underrepresented students and to advance diversity and equity. He holds a master's in conflict resolution from Portland State University and has supported many state agencies and nonprofits and private sector organizations with their diversity and equity initiatives. We're really happy to have you here, Parfait. And I'd like to offer you your 5 minutes to plant your flag in this conversation.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Kelly and Mayor and the City Council members, and for this opportunity to be on this platform. And first and foremost, for this series of conversations around social justice and race. And as you all caught from my name, it's an unusual name. In the community because it's a name that comes from West Africa, where my origins lay. I migrated to the United States 20 years ago, but I was born in Benin Republic, small country in West Africa, and I'm the middle child of three kids, and my dad was the first in his family to ever go to college and to get a degree. And so growing up, education was always ingrained into our minds as being the key, the secret to a better future. And so I grew up, even as I got into my teenage years, thinking about having identity challenges and trying to figure out what I was going to do when I grow up. Even my most, my own passion with certain things always will fall as plan B compared to education. Education was always plan A, because with that, that's your safety net. And so when I moved to the United States of America some 20 years ago, to pursue my education, that reality, that promise of education being an equalizer, a transformer, a change agent in one's life journey, proved to be true in my case. But the more I stayed in America, the more I learned about the realities on the ground. It became appalling and heartbreaking to see that education is not promising the same outcomes to folks who look like me. In fact, one's race is an indicator of one's likelihood to be less successful in the educational system, going from the K to 12 system all the way to higher ed. And so that became an area of passion for me on how do we level the field, how do we address this issue? Because if education, as I was always told from my childhood, was the one thing that could help promise a different future, and if that promise is not true for fellow Americans, where's the hope, right? Where is the hope? And so I spent the last few years trying to play my part in higher ed, in trying to remove those barriers and make sure that that promise remains true for every American. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about some of the challenges, some of maybe the opportunities and ideas with this amazing panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Next, I'm going to introduce Fernell Miller. Fernell is the founder and CEO of The Root of Us, a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy with a focus on identity development, empowerment, and bringing strong communities. She's also a physical educator in the public school system. Students are at the center of everything Fernell does personally and professionally. As a 38-year veteran educator, she is an education activist, community organizer for social change, The root of her commitment to disrupting the white narrative over the past 3 decades is cemented in rich relationships that have enhanced community. Fernell started mentorship and leadership programs for Black youth and young adults to help build community and support Black student unions in middle and high school. Many organizations and communities invite Fernell to share her story and host discussions about racial identity and lead racial healing circles. She and her family are longtime residents of the Kenmore community. She continues to share her experience and expertise with young people through many activities that help to build community, foster education and understanding, while bringing the fun for families and folks of all age, ethnicities, races, genders, and abilities. So Fernell, I invite you to plant your flag in the conversation.
Well, first, thank you so much for having me today, to Mayor and council members. And I just am reckoning with, or relating to Parfait's story of being from a family of educators. My parents, my grandparents, aunts and uncles on both sides, every direction I looked growing up were from my family of educators. In fact, I tried not to be a teacher. I thought, isn't there anything else I can do? And one of the reasons I'm a PE teacher is because I got to see representation in front of me in junior high. I had no idea that you could teach outside of a desk or outside the school. And since I'm in love with the outdoors and nature and all, that was the perfect fit for me. And even though I knew inside my home what Black excellence looked like, it was not mirrored outside my home in the wall of white educators that we have. And so it wasn't until I saw what a possibility was there, I didn't have that. And so I'm a big advocate for students being able to see themselves, learn their identity. I call myself the Black girl in suburbia, being out here in Marysville and in Everett, and the representation is very small. The white space is very, very heavy. And so the pandemic was a relief for kids, meaning to get out of the pressure and the daily microaggressions and racism that they feel in such a heavy way. Because as I was checking in with kids as they, were separated from school and their friends and having trouble with, technology and, homework and tired and just all of the things that go on in, kids' bodies, they were relieved. Even in all of that, they were relieved, like the breath that they never can catch. They finally could go, wow, is this how it feels to not be in such an oppressive environment, to be tracked and traced and followed and policed and suspicion and all over your shoulder while you're trying to learn. And they had no idea. I mean, they do have an idea, but no idea how it felt to be out of that. And so as I've been talking and healing with them, the things that they wish for most is for their voice to be heard of how they experience school. This great opportunity that's supposed to, help all is hurting them so badly that they can't even articulate it anymore. And you know how it hurts to tell someone you love that you're hurting me? That's the relationship with educators, teachers, administrators, coaches is the same thing that's happening in the streets of our nation are happening under the roof in our schools. And we haven't taken a look. We've been educating kids with their knee on their neck for decades. And so the pandemic had to, lifted that knee for a moment. And we really need to look students in the eye and say, I'm oh so sorry. I'm so sorry for not hearing you, for not seeing you, for not stepping up for you, for not protecting you, for lying to you and letting everybody believe a lie about you because they're not reflected in their curriculum. It's violent to them to be left out of everything or be silenced in their voice. And so even with, I'm in one of the richest, most resourced school districts in the state, and all the kids are just like, I can't do it. I haven't had I don't want to go back to school. How can you make them go back to a system that doesn't include them, doesn't see them, dehumanizes them, criminalizes them? It's just, I'm looking for ways to, okay, well, how can we go back to school? What would it look like? So the survey that we've been working on lets them answer questions they've never been asked, things that they don't ever get a chance to talk about. They're talking about that, and their answers are policy. The way they've answered, the way they look at it, what they need, they're writing policy right now. And if we would just turn that around to hear those who are in the most need should take the lead, and we need to focus there. So thank you for letting me come and represent them.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're going to move on to Dr. Thelma Jackson. I'm going to introduce you one more time to the community. Dr. Thelma Jackson is owner of Foresight Consultants. She brings 40 years of consulting experience in education change initiatives, restructuring and reform, equity and diversity, and policymaking, school boardmanship, cultural competency, community mobilization, strategic planning, and educational auditing, school improvement, and more. She served on task force and advisory councils for 5 governors in the state of Washington. She's served in numerous leadership capacities over the years. She's been the president of the Washington State School Directors Association for 20 years. She was a member and a 5-time president of the North Thurston School Board. She was president of the Pacific region of the National School Boards Association, chair of the State Advisory Council on Vocational Education, chairperson of the Washington State Legislative Ethics Board, chair of the Commission on African American Affairs, and president of the Board of Trustees of the Evergreen State College. Thelma has served in numerous boards and communities of community, civic, and service organization, and is a recipient of numerous recognitions and awards for educational and community service. She is a founding member and serves on the steering committee of the Black Education Strategy Roundtable before serving as its project director, founding member, She's been a founding member of the Black Alliance of Thurston County, past president of the Washington Alliance of Black School Educators, and is a past member of the board of directors of the League of Education Voters. Dr. Jackson currently serves as president of the board of directors of SOAR Academy, one of 8 inaugural charter schools in Tacoma, Washington. She received a Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and a doctorate degree in educational leadership and change from Fielding Graduate University in Santa Barbara, California. She and her husband, Nat, are proud parents of 3 children and grandparents of 4 granddaughters. They have resided in the state of Washington for 52 years and in the Olympia area for the last 49 years. Welcome, Thelma. We are going by first names, everyone. And I give you your 5 minutes to plant your flag in this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. It's really a pleasure to be a part of this 4th and final town hall meeting. And as you were reading those comments to me, I was reflecting upon just how long I have been involved in various aspects of education. So for this particular town hall to be focusing on the racial justice in the education system, it's like I'm home. This is my place. This is where I put my tent in the sand, and for a number of decades have put a lot of time and energy to an education system that has not been just, that has not been fair, that has not been equitable. So my fellow panelists, Parfait and Fernell, your comments were terrific. Fernell, as you talk about what students are going through right now, the situation we find ourselves in with the Black Lives Matter movement, with all of the protests and all of the recognition that finally has come to situations that have been there for many, many decades. So they're beginning to come out into the open. We're beginning to have dialogues and discussions that we've never had before. And when we begin to hear students talking about they haven't felt included, haven't felt seen, haven't felt heard. And that doesn't even touch upon the Black professionals out there in the education system. And so I just want to, again, thank City of Tacoma, City of Olympia. I'm sorry, I was on a webinar with Tacoma yesterday, but City of Olympia for having the foresight to allow Kelly to convene these 4 town halls, because the timing is right. And I deeply appreciate the fact that education made one of these 4 major topics that you've tackled, because education is truly the key, as Parfait said, and education is inextricably intertwined in the other 3 topics that the town halls have dealt with. And so we are looking at an education system now that finds itself front and center in the eyes of this nation, as we have millions and millions of students, preschool through higher ed, wondering what education is going to look like in the future, as we debate the quandary between in-person instruction, distance learning, virtual learning, and all of these kinds of things. And the same as the fact that the COVID-19 virus exposed the soft underbelly of every aspect of society, it is also true for the education system. And we've been tinkering around the edge of that system for many, many years. And I have been in the middle of a lot of those battles, whether we're talking about the achievement gap, whether we're talking about disproportionality in discipline, whether we're talking about the school to prison pipeline, whether we're talking about a number of things that we've bitten off bit by bit. But now we're forced to look at this entire system. And now we have to add the digital divide to this whole thing. We have to bring poverty 360 degrees as we're talking about students with unsupervised distance learning in homes whose parents can't afford to be there with them. We have to look at the curriculum. We've had some things that's happened over the last few months, particularly the 1619 project that talks about 400 years of what is going on. It's nothing new, but all of a sudden we're talking about it. We're dialoguing, we're having webinars, we're discussing it. And so that's tremendously helpful. But from the point of view of me and what brings up my passion to this topic of education, I'm a product of the Deep South. I grew up in segregated education. I lived under Jim Crow laws. I don't have to read about Jim Crow. I lived it. I escaped integration in that it was just a step or two behind me. And so participating in the civil rights movement was on the periphery of my life. But I always wondered why the difference, why the inequity, why the discrimination, the prejudice, the bias, and all of that as a child growing up under those conditions. And so as we wrap this education discussion around this whole issue of racial justice in America, we've got to face the education system as well, and where it needs to be redesigned, transformed, and move forward so that all people can be adequately prepared for a future and a life that this country dictates we should have.
Thank you, Thelma. That was profound. All right, so our final panelist I get to introduce, Les Purce, President Emeritus of the Evergreen State College. And just for full disclosure, the Purce and the Purse in both our names is because we got it from the same people. So here we go. Dr. Thomas L. Les Purce is President Emeritus of the Evergreen State College. He served as president from July 1st, 2000 until September 30th, 2015. Prior to that, he served as Vice President of Extended University Affairs and Dean of Extended Academic Programs at Washington State University. When he went to Evergreen, it was kind of a homecoming because as president, it was kind of a homecoming because he had been there before as executive vice president at the college from 1992 to 1995. He also served as the interim president of Evergreen for 2 years before that. He came to Evergreen first, and I remember this personally, in 1989 as vice president for college advancement. Before that, Les was at Idaho State University, and where he served as special assistant to the president and director of the Research Park and Economic Development. His career in the state of Idaho spanned 15 years in both the public and the private sector. He was the first Black elected official in the state, where he served as city council member and then mayor of Pocatello. He later served as the director of Idaho's Department of Administration, as well as the director of Idaho's Department of Health and Welfare under Governor John Evans. In the private sector, he was partner and chief operating officer of Power Engineering in Haley, Idaho. Power Engineering was one of the fastest growing electrical engineering firms in the Northwest. Les holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology, a Master of Arts degree in education, and a Doctorate of Counselor Education from Idaho State University. He's attended Harvard University's Institute for Educational Management. He also has 2 honorary degrees. He has an honorary degree, an honorary Doctor of Humane Letters degree from the University of North Carolina in Asheville, as well as an honorary degree of Doctor of Laws from SUNY Geneseo, New York. So I'm going to let you plant your flag in this conversation.
Thank you, sis. It's really a pleasure to be here and to see Thelma, my good friend, and to thank the council for their leadership in carrying on this important discussion. Most importantly for me, it's wonderful to see these 2 young people taking up the flag, Fernell and Parfait, in your work in education at those levels. My dear friend Thelma really put the capsule on everything that we're looking at and thinking and what we're confronted with at this point in time. if one thing about this virus is clear, is that it's really taken the curtains and down and forced us to really look at the profound weaknesses that we have in our democracy. I always told the story about when I talk about education and my family, which is, I think, a reflection of African-American people in this country. We tell the story in my family about my Uncle Freddie at the turn of the last century, who, with his friends, built one of the first schoolhouses in Carolina County, Virginia, because of segregation and lack of access. They built a schoolhouse because they knew that the only way they were going to be able to ensure the future of their children was to be able to get education in that county for those kids. But more importantly, they understood that it was the foundation of the future and for a good life. The fact of segregation and its results long-term in this country haven't changed. We see it systemically in all of my career and work in higher education. And I chose the Evergreen State College as president because of what it articulated and aspired to. And that is to open the minds of young people. One of its key founding theses was diversity and inclusion as well. And people walked that talk and attempted to articulate that as part of who we were. And even in that 17-year journey, I began to see the way that systemically within our state and federal system, that the resources and the policies were directed and established in such a way that poor people and people of color stayed behind with a foot on their neck. The issues around resources were not issues around how we identify a system that can make up for the systemic injuries that have happened in the past. They were designed for the future and the present. It only maintained the inequities. This virus is really bringing those things together and apparent. In higher education, we face a real reckoning. We can see all of the weaknesses that are here now in regard to the cost of education, the assumptions we make about what a college campus should even look like, and who gets education. And I guess my flag would be planted in the fact that we have work to do in this country that is about as basic as it can get. How do we make sure in some way that poor people are not the most likely to end up in prison, particularly males? African-American males, Hispanics, you look at the prison system, how does that work? It's a systematic response to a system that ensures that, one, you don't get the foundation in regard to education in order to be able to become successful, to raise a family, to be able to have the skills to be able to do that. As we begin to come out of this virus and to really take on these challenges of our country, systematically, we have to look at really how this system has been set up from the beginning. And it comes from the foundations of segregation. It comes from the systemic racism in terms of attitudes in subtle and in gross ways that have really caused us to find ourselves where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great. So at this point is where we welcome questions from our attendees. As always, I make the request that we keep our communications with each other kind and respectful. We get farther that way. Attendees can write questions and I as moderator will ask them. I'm going to, you can, if you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, there is a Q&A button. For all you attendees, if you have a question, you go ahead and click there and write your question in there. I will be on the lookout for those questions and I will frame them to save time. I'll be looking for similar questions and themes so we're not asking the same question over and over again. I may reframe your question for clarity. If a question calls for a follow-up, I think I will ask it. as a reminder to you all, I want to, we will not be taking questions for council. Council is here much like our community to listen and learn. If you want to send council questions, you can through their email, citycouncil@ci.olympia.wa.us. We also will be taking all of these questions and looking at them both, so your question will not be lost. We have those, and we document the questions that they're asked anyway. So to get us started, I'm going to start as the questions start to come in. I was struck by something today, and I think I'd like to ask the panel about this. So it has been 66 years in May since the Brown versus Board of Education was decided. And you know, we're edging up on 70 years. Today, the Justice Department announced that Yale University is guilty of discriminating against whites and Asian applicants. So I'm going to put that on the table. What does this say about where we are, about equal access? Whoever wants to jump in?
Thelma.
Okay, Thelma.
Did I understand you to say that that ruling came today?
Yes.
That white and Asian students have been discriminated against?
Yes.
And so what's my comment about it?
Yes. So, and what does that say? Given 66 years out from the Brown versus Board of Education, what does that say? The state access, equal access.
I think it's hogwash. And all we have to do is look at the history, to look at what has happened in this country, to look at that separate but unequal doctrine that this nation has lived under, to look at where we are in 2020 and looking back, you know, in 1954 with Board versus Brown of Education, and here we are 66 years later with our education systems at all the levels almost more segregated than they have ever been. They have resegregated. Why is that? Les talked about the fact that the virus has caused us to have to re-examine these systems of education. And I don't know the intricacies around this decision today. I'd certainly be interested in reading about it, but it's been tried before. Reverse discrimination, the Balky decision with affirmative action down in California, you know, and it's as though you can't include someone unless you're excluding someone.
Right.
And education is no different than anything else. There's gotta be an opening for people to be let in. And those who have traditionally been the ones in have got to make room for those who've been left out. And so for an institution like Yale, who has a history of racism itself, going all the way back to their role during the slave trade and you know, support of all that, I won't comment much further without, you know, really having somebody else. I have no idea that happened today. So I'll have to read, you know, what was the issue that came before them? What were the arguments made? What was the rationale for that finding to be delivered? Otherwise,
yeah. And this was Department of Justice.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would just add, and I'll say this to the council, and to all of us who are invested in this democracy. The hardest challenge we're going to have is to be able to find some basis by which we can accept the fact that this whole process of our democracy, given our history, that is going to be the biggest challenge for us to resolve around race and the inequitable nature of our relationship together. And I'll just use African Americans as an example historically. And I think we're all aware of this in terms of the cost of what has happened in regard to slavery and where everyone started from. Affirmative action, the desire to correct those failings, has been contentious from its beginning because it has profound political implications about how you make those kinds of adjustments, particularly when you have those that don't agree or take issue with it or are threatened by it. And this decision is just a reflection of the reality of what we have to figure out how we overcome. This assumption that someone else has to lose if somehow you find equity for someone else. That's one of the fundamental kind of conversations we have to have, because that is bogus. It always has been bogus, and it's been the lever by which we've been able to keep our foot on the neck of people that have been disadvantaged. It's just that simple. And I say that as an educator, as a person that's walked through the halls and argued on behalf of financial aid, of scholarships for kids that are disadvantaged. In every case, my case for those things are based on the fact that these people are behind in the first place. And that's the thing we have to find some window to be able to try to understand and to accept and to begin the conversation around.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that piece of information. I wasn't aware of it, but where my mind went is that this is what happens when the whole educational system fails. There's a failure to educate fellow Americans across the racial lines about our shared history, about historical facts. And that leads a generation of folks to conjecture up some narratives that allow them to get to the conclusion of things like, well, by providing equitable outcomes to some, it's reverse racism and so forth. That's a direct result of the failure of our educational system to teach our shared history so that Americans, no matter their races, understand those dynamics, those impacts on populations. You know, a study came out just in February this year from the EdBuild organization, and that was featured on NPR. And they did a very thorough study on how funding of schools in America was disproportionately impacting Black folks. There's a gap of $23 billion in terms of the allocation of dollars to schools that are predominantly white versus schools that are predominantly Black. And the idea here is when we talk about the racial justice and education, we can focus on what's going on in the classrooms, the curriculum and what have you, but we really have to zoom out and look at, and let's mention that, we got to zoom out and look at the systemic. We got to look at the ways in which the district lines are being drawn, which are the basis on which from very early on, some of the gaps are happening because the money is just being allocated to certain areas where they get the resources, the technology, the educators, and then the gaps just get further and further along. By grade 4, and the research tells us that an African-American student is behind by 2 grades already by grade 4. So when there are systemic patterns like this because of the way schools lines are divided and the way in which resources are allocated, when those lines, the funding, and then without even talking about the ways in which within the classroom, as my sister Fernell mentioned, the experiences that Black students are having, there's a violence in that. I call it the silent violence, right? That is not seen visible through visible wounds, but it's felt deep in the soul and the spirit. When those things are in place and limiting access to more opportunities as a Black citizen trying to move up in their academic career, and we don't realize, we don't understand that because we're not learning about it in the school system that is supposed to teach us those things. No wonder that you will have folks who feel legitimized in their reasoning that by trying to implement anti-racist policies, that it is somehow racist, right? It's an utter lack of understanding of how racism has worked, how the status quo has maintained certain outcomes that are disproportionate. And that's the failure of our educational system. And it's not just the Black community that is suffering from that failure. We are all, as a nation, Black and white alike, because we are missing key pieces of our shared history and how it has set us to where we are right now.
And I'll thank you for that, Parfait. I'm just going to add on to that. The school systems are not broken. They're doing exactly what they were designed to do, and they're working beautifully to do that, to disenfranchise, to discredit, all of that. So you can't fix wrong. You have to make it right. So we don't want to pick up the wrong that we've been doing and try to fix and remold and no, we're done with that. And the pandemic and kids, our awareness says that we're done with that. We cannot go back. The school that we knew before is done. And I love this liminal space between the time that what was and the time that's to come, to be able to be in a cocoon to figure it out and go forward new, because this is going to be beautiful now that we know what we know, and we can lean into understanding that what we had was never right in the first place. So let's not try to pick up that old garbage, and let's go forward with some good stuff and let the kids lead us, because they're the ones in it and have to live it. And so they want you to hear how it lands on them so they can go, whoa, wait. Let me show you how to do it. They're the emperor's clothes story. And they tell us all the time. I said, I love it when kids correct me and tell me, come on, Miss Miller, your wig's on crooked today or something. I go, thank you, baby. Thank you for telling me, because I know it's out of love that they tell me that. They're telling us this out of love. Their protest and resistance is out of love. They want us to do it right. They want us to get it right. But you're killing us. Your bottom's way out. Your cloak of whiteness and supremacy and honoring one way is over. It's hurting all of us. I've got not just our Black community, brown community screaming about it. All of the kids are screaming about it. They can't do that old way anymore. That was wrong, and we're done with that, and we need to pick up and we need to make it right and let them lead. The answer is yes, and. Equity's answer is easy. Yes, and. Always. And everybody gets what they need all the time. Nobody has to lose. I don't know who, that whole mentality of scarcity, that's all the made up, just like construction of race. It's all swirling around. Like, I don't know where you live in your head, but that's not what that they're experiencing. So always, yes, and it's over. Sorry.
Hear, hear.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've got some questions from the community. A member of the community would like the panelists to talk about the school to prison pipeline, the challenges, the solution, what can be done to reduce or eliminate that flow. Thelma?
Okay, I'll take that on. I've spent a lot of time working on this school to prison pipeline issue, and my interest in that arose out of my looking at the achievement gap, who's caught in that achievement gap, and then it led me into the disproportionality in discipline. The same group of people in the achievement gap are also being disproportionately suspended and expelled from school. So you look at how discipline is handled in our school, and you find out that it differs from one school to the next, one school district to the next, one community to the next. And when you look at what those numbers look like, it directly reflects the adult penal system. And when you figure out that the school was serving as the farm system to the adult penal system, and that prison in this country had become a major industry, and no interest in cutting down on those occupying prison beds. The interest was trying to keep them as full as long as you could. And in working with school people, especially vice principals, who are the primary disciplinarians in a secondary school, it had not dawned on them how they were being complicit in feeding that adult prison system. And so that school to prison pipeline concept was foreign to them. They didn't see where they were doing anything wrong. You know, they couldn't see how turning the students out, you know, and not to mention the double standards in the discipline to start with. So the school to prison pipeline continues to be alive and well. It has slowed down somewhat in this state because we actually wound up having to change legislation to get some differences in how discipline is dispersed in the public school system at least. But if we can sever and disrupt the pipeline from the K-12 system, we could do so much more to right this adult penal system that is so out of kilter and so disproportionate. But the schools are feeding that prison pipeline.
And I would just add that it brings a special challenge for all of us that are public policy people, that we think about our democracy and how we allocate our tax dollars and where they go, because it's not just a matter of dealing with the system that Fernell talked about at the elementary school and the public school system itself that is not serving students of color and poor people well. But now that we have this pipeline that's full of all of these people, largely poor and people of color, our educational strategy cannot just be how do we build the foundation for the beginning of our public school system, but how do we also address these individuals that we have to help get back into the system in a healthy and a productive way that doesn't penalize, but can build programs to ensure their successful reintroduction into our society. There are so many and so many talented people that have been lost, but they do not have to be lost. So in a public policy sense, as we talk about our public service, we have to look at each of these components, the system we have, the people that we have to try to serve that are recovering from this, that will be recovering from this penal system, as well as the system that we have that then moves on to higher education. We have a lot of work to do, and it's going to be very tough, very hard work for us to do. But the benefits to our society will be tremendous if we're able to do it.
They are all our children.
Yep.
And we will profit
Yep.
or perish by whatever they become. James Baldwin.
Yep.
Is what you just said.
Yep.
Les.
Yep.
And the greeting the African villages ask, how are the children on greeting each other in every village? And we know that if the children are well, our foundation of our society is well, we'll be thriving if our children are, and our children are not well. They're hurting so bad. We're not tending to their heart, their spirit. We've been through collective trauma. We haven't even begun to talk about we need collective healing. We can't build little programs off to the side, because then that still seats it from the seat of white supremacy that you can have a little bit, you can have a little bit, nope. We all, what did I just say? Yes, and all, always, everyone, all the time, wherever it is. And what that looks like is, let the kids lead you. They'll tell you. I have a little hair station in my PE office just because that's one of the things that is a culturally, social, emotional activity that helps them feel like bring them back to themselves so they can even go back into the classroom. I have adults that come to use my little hair station. Miss Miller, where's your curling iron? I need a hair dryer real quick. Can you braid my hair back together? I mean, we all just want to be a space to be our full selves, our most authentic selves, everywhere, wherever we are. And while kids are in that developmental stage, we're slamming them into boxes and putting labels and trifling them to death and policing them everywhere. I don't know how they're learning anything anyway. It's like standing up all day knowing that you're never, never, never going to get to sit down and take a rest. And then now you got to learn on top of all of that. So we are not tending to the hearts, our spirit of our, that's where we start any of this work. And I said that you get so much farther if you just be honest and authentic and say, I'm so, so sorry. I'm so sorry I failed you. Please show me how to make it right, and let them lead. That's what I've been telling every lawmaker, anybody who will listen, is please start there. Because you don't just get off somebody's neck and then step over them and then start doing all this stuff and leave them on the ground. You didn't even recognize. I need help to the feet. I need my basic needs. I need Maslow taken care of first. Then we can build from there. You don't just get up and go, oh, oopsie, and move on. That's ugly, wrong, feels wrong, and kids are not having it. I don't know about them, but I'm not having it. So let's start there with each other, and especially with our youth. If I don't have them to look at, the youth, I don't know how I'd make it through the day without students and their hope, their brilliance, their desire, their creativity. We need them, and we're crushing them. We don't even look at them. I ask them all the time, do you know you get to have input into your educational career? Does anybody ever ask you? And they just look at me like, you're gonna ask me? Yes, baby, I need your help. Please.
So, Parfait, I'd like to make sure you get.
Yeah, this is just a great conversation. I think that the wording of the question was, how do we stop or, lower this school to prison pipeline? And I just resonated with some of the things that Sister Fernell was talking about. I think there's an empathy gap. There's this chasm. There's this us and the other, right? There's an othering happening. That's what's making it possible to have these disproportionate, disciplinary practices in the classroom that creates this pipeline. It's the other. And what is at the root of that othering is our segregation, right? The communities are segregated as a result of this snowball effect of policies from long ago. And so when those intersect with economics, right? We are not in the same churches. We are not in the same neighborhoods. We are not in the same schools. And then we pluck the majority of teachers in good to decent schools are, let's face it, white teachers. And there is that relational gap with students who don't have the same lived experience as them, the same trauma, the same experiences, period. And so there's not that connection point, that relational point, that multicultural competency to be able to relate, understand, empathize, humanize in a way that would be different if there was that connection, right? And so concretely, practically, what does it look like? Let's rethink the ways our schools are delineated. That's one. Two, we need representation in schools. If we had a greater representation of folks with that same lived experience in the classrooms, I'll tell you, those numbers will look better, right? Because there's that relatability of the experience. There's that humanization that happens. And again, I'm not saying that teachers are overtly or intentionally evil or mean towards those kids, but it's the direct result of the segregation, the lack of relationship between our communities. So we don't know each other, we don't understand each other, and how can we support each other effectively when there's that segregation there? So those are my thoughts, really thinking about how do we dismantle segregation that is maintained through economics right now. So for the policymakers, that's what we got to be thinking about. And then how do we get more representation in the classroom? So those are my few cents with this particular question.
Okay, thank you so much. So as always with all of these town halls, the Olympia community asks what they can do to help and make change. I have a question from the community. As a white parent of a white son at a local school, how can parents best insist that school districts move away from white-centered curriculum? Particularly what Thelma was talking about with the 1619 project and the Black experience being available within the school. Who wants to go?
I would say that one of the first things white parents can do is to begin to acknowledge what the real situation is. And for the new awareness that's out there now, when we talk about educational malpractice in this country and the miseducation, white parents are beginning to realize that their white students are being shortchanged as well. Because if we don't change of what we teach, how we teach, and when we teach it, we will have another generation of white adults growing up thinking that they're privileged and they're different and they're superior. So everyone would benefit from an assessment of our schools, the policies, how they're organized, the curriculum, the instructional materials, even the agrarian calendar that we have lived under. The virus has also given us a chance to re-examine. I mean, I'm listening to the news and they're talking about spring football. Well, there was nothing magic about the spring, that football had to be in the fall, except practice and tradition. And so we're beginning to have to think seriously about year-round school, staggered school years, and the whole system. Hopefully, it is my hope that this downturn and this quarantine is forcing educators, teachers, administrators, and parents to re-examine school as we have come to know it. We thought of it as this place with four walls. We're now realizing that school is about teaching and learning, and it takes place in all kinds of settings. So for white parents that's trying to figure out what's going to be going forward in the future, hopefully they'll revisit some of these things they're listening and learning about, and something they've been reading about in this new awareness, and demand differently for their students as well, because all of the students will benefit. It's not just about making changes for Black kids and other students of color and disenfranchised students. All of students would benefit from a transformed, overhauled educational system, and our white allies can be tremendously helpful in making sure that that happens.
Thank you.
And they should use the same avenues that we've always used. They should talk with their school boards. They should get together and build coalitions with other people around these issues and change them just like we would change them if we had some concern about a fundamental structural error in our education system like we have in the past. It should be approached in the same way, and they need to be able to work hard at educating themselves about what those issues are, and to talk with their kids about why they're pushing for those kinds of changes. That's how you do systemic change within a school system. Much as Thelma said, that's how you get it started, but it must be sustained.
Parfait, Fernell?
You go ahead for now.
I've got, I spent 80 days with Erin Jones on her Zoom link and live Facebook with students from all over the state. And she used, I love Erin, she pulls out her Rolodex. She's got, 5,000 people in it. And she had every author, poet, athlete, lawyer, congresswoman, council person of color in front of this group of kids. And they learn more in that 80 days of having adults and teachers and educators of color come to their Zoom classroom. And a little 11-year-old white girl says, where have all these people been? Why don't I learn about them in school? How come you've kept them from me? When she goes home, she goes, why am I infiltrate all my Disney, Nancy Drew? Where is the rest of the world? Why are they missing? Who did this? So kids know, everybody benefits. And so the student I had, she wrote a petition to petition her school board. 600, over 600 students of all ages, grades, and educators begging for, please teach us our history. Please have ethnic studies. Please have Black studies. I know they know more about dress code and their bra straps than they do about their own history. They're starving for it. They're demanding it. All the kids, we all benefit. So be more than an ally, advocate, be an accomplice, get it done. You've got the power.
I have to say, Thelma, Thelma said something that, as I have watched as a retired person now, the process of these institutions being opened up and observing these institutions. You look at higher education, you look at the way we formed curriculum in the past, you look at pricing and the assumptions about what it costs for an education. All of these things will never be the same. I say this to everyone right now. There's no way that we go back after this. It just will not happen.
No.
Question about what you pay for non-resident tuition, which is the foundation of every one of our public institutions in this state. The issue about what is quality, when in reality, a person in the classroom, thematic teaching and seminars like we did at Evergreen, and distance education components, all can be together very powerful ways to deliver education to everyone. But I'll tell you this, it shouldn't be designed in such a way that people that have the money get to continue to go to a campus as they idealize it, and the money flows that direction, as opposed to investing the money in an area where we can get the highest quality kinds of curriculum development and educators that can do the most powerful blend of education for the young people, for people that are coming out of prison, for people that want to go back to school, because we're going to need all of them to bring this democracy back again. We're going to need all of them, and it's got to be priced in a way that people can access it and our society benefits from what they learn and what they give us back. We've got to do this. I mean, we aren't going to have any choice if we want to continue to be a democracy.
Yeah. My thoughts on that, this is great. My thoughts on this is that, there was an old way of thinking, and this is very close to what Les is mentioning and talking about in Fernell as well. There's this old way of thinking that we need to wait to get the approval from the way the system has been. And what these protests have been showing us and telling us is that time is over. Like, there's a sense of urgency. One of my favorite political analysts, Van Jones, on the eve of the Black Lives Matter movement, he had a pretty powerful segment on CNN where I consider him a very consequential activist, especially in the work with criminal justice. He's been able to push forward some pretty powerful policies. And anyway, as he was commenting on that segment, he was talking about how himself as an activist feels that his time is up. It feels as though the word on the street from the youth is that you all front runners, activists, you failed us. We want change now. We want to disrupt what has been. And that disruption has come in a light of a lot of innovation. Like what you were describing there, Fernell, what Erin Jones has done in our community in creating a virtual classroom where she featured local Black and Brown leaders that our entire K-12 system has never shown to any of our students. And they're living in our midst, making consequential impact in our communities. And these kids are seeing them, hearing about them, And that changes the narrative. That's transformative. That changes their experience. Now they grow up having seen Black and brown folks who are doing amazing things that they want to emulate beyond them just being basketball players, right? So that innovation, this last 20 years have been really interesting in the field of technology, where there's this terminology around disruptive technologies that come and change the status quo, and then old businesses are out the door. I think the time is up too with some of those our old systems of education and you name it. And I want to end my comment on this topic with some thoughts of John Lewis, the late John Lewis, who often says, get into the good trouble, right? The good trouble. The time right now is for those who are creative, innovative in getting into the good trouble. In higher ed, there's nothing that keeps anyone to change their curriculum, to emulate some of the ideas that Les is talking about here, having a seminar format, having different voices to disrupt the old narrative. In the K-12 system, as a parent, nothing holds you, right? But what are you gonna do? It's the call to action, the individual call to action and creativity.
Perfect, thank you. We've come to the time where the final question, which is the moderator's final question, and you all got a chance to think about it, hopefully. And that is, what does long-term sustainable change look like? And what is the work to get us there? Who would like to go first?
I think we've already been saying it all this time. It's like, I don't think that's not a new question. I think we, and just
Talk some more about it.
Well, starting with the acknowledgement and understanding we are not going back. There isn't any old school the way it was. Acknowledge that we need to go forward, tend to the hearts of the students first, bring our spirit forward so we can go forward together with all of this creative and innovation. The Parfait's made such a good point. All of panelists have made such a good point about the systemic issues that are hidden. They're hidden on purpose. Our oppressor doesn't let us complain. And when we complain, then we've got some attitude problem. Well, hello. Let's talk about that problem. And it's rooted in anti-Blackness, and we don't ever address that in our country. And if we haven't been taught and programmed to hate Blackness and not racism, that's the problem. So moving your zip codes, the redlining, the suburbing, all of that it's segregation under, coded nicer terminology and words. But we're just repeating the same cycle because we won't go back to our roots, hello, the root of us, to get at those issues of what we've built the nation on, which is our anti-Blackness. And so all the policies and anti-oppressive education, ethnic studies, STEM, religious education, civics, all of those things have that lens, that tainted, like a gray sticky film on it that doesn't allow us to just come with it and bring it. And we all see it. We all see, oh, you see that? It's like the emperor's clothes. We all see it, but we don't want to look. We've been forced to look. So we need to unlearn and relearn and get to the root of all of that. And all of us. There we go. There's mine.
I really gave this question a little more thought this time than the first time, trying to come up with a few succinct words that kind of wrapped up everything I've heard everybody say here today. We must deepen our commitment to creating a just and equitable world, to confront bias, transform institutional policies, accelerate systemic change, and weave this value throughout everything we do, particularly in our education system, which is the key to everything.
Woo, woo, there it is. That's why she's the expert.
Parfait, you were going.
Hard to top that. I agree with everything that's been said on this panel, I think this closing line are really going to sound like a repetition of some of the themes that were talked about. But as I was thinking about this parting question, I went with a bulleted list approach to it. And here they are. I think the first one is around, it is important for us to deal with the core issue of self-interest. If we go back to the founding fathers and the genesis of this nation, it was the self-interest of few at the expense of others that got the ball rolling. And it is still the self-interest of the few at the expense of others that's keeping it alive. And what does it look like concretely when we decide where we want to move to, when we decide where we're going to send our kids to school? Those conversations get really close to home, because at the end of the day, it's that self-interest, mine. What about the other? And as long as we don't wrestle in front of the mirror with that self-interest, where the privilege lies, where the advantage lies, we will be dealing with this issue on and on and on. And so, so thinking about where poverty, economics intersects with that self-interest, and shifting from that paradigm of me, us versus them to us. We are fellow Americans, all made in the image of the Creator, with worth and value, with the same rights to claim, for the pursuit of happiness. Just a paraphrase here of a promise that is given to every American. So what is going to be the cost for me to achieve that us dynamic? What is going to be the cost for you to get us there? Those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much. And Big Bro, what you got to say?
Well, my thinking is a bit more pragmatic as I think about your city council, as I think about trustees that are involved in our higher education system, as I think about school board members that are involved in the delivery of the education system. One other thing that's happened as we're living through these times are the fact that if in fact we are committed to trying to develop strategies that respond to these issues of institutional racism, systemic bias, and equity within the context of a democracy, one of the things that has to happen, and I say this to the council and to my fellow citizens and my colleagues here, we have to break down the silos and these false assumptions that we have about what the job of the city council is, who has to face issues of homelessness, of law enforcement, of zoning and housing, and the delivery of services to our citizens, and not see that as being separate and apart from the issues about our citizens and how they get their education and who does not get their education. We also must break down the barriers between that and the legislative process that deals with other pieces of these components that affect all of us. And what that means is the conversation you're having now with us and the others that you've had have to somehow translate in your strategy for the city, the development of conversations with the other links. We can no longer have these processes be isolated. You can't deal that way anymore. People aren't. And the reason why all of us are feeling to some degree uncomfortable and amazed at what's going on, because the citizens and the people are saying they're hungry people, they're uneducated people, they're sick people that aren't getting health care, there are people that aren't getting equitable education. We have policies that are being driven from different entities of our democracy that are blocking the process for us to be able to have and develop a coherent kind of relationship for our citizens. And the only way we begin to do that, I think, if you're talking about long-term change now, is think about the fact that we've got to break down these silos and have plan conversations with every entity that's involved in making these public policy decisions that affect our lives, health, education, incarceration, and on and on and on. So, I mean, that would be my counsel to you, that we're in an expansive period here, all of us are. A very expansive period where things are not going to be the way Thelma and I knew them when we grew up, and the education system that we've dealt with and what we've advised about and what I've led in. I look at this thing and I go, my God, what a time to be in the middle of this sort of thing. But it's no longer a silo. It can't be. And if you want to be able to respond to the immediate anger that citizens have, to the concerns that we have about poor people laying out in the street in droves increasingly, the concerns neighbors have about the potential theft or all of these pieces, we have to start talking across lines intergovernmentally, interinstitutionally, but centered around these issues that you've committed yourself to as a council. That's what I would say. It's been a real delight for me to be here and to hear this conversation. And Thelma, it's always so wonderful to see you.
It's been great.
So wonderful to meet Fernell and Parfait. How wonderful.
I'm Patty. Thank you.
Absolutely terrific.
And just to add on to Les is, and have the youth in on those conversations.
Absolutely.
Hello.
Absolutely.
Break the silo and listen to the youth who are living it and let them lead it. Amen. That's all I say. Amen to everybody in the panel. Wow.
Yeah, I echo that.
Mayor Selby, I turn this back to you.
Thank you, Kelly, so much. And thank you to this another esteemed panel sharing your treasure of wisdom with us on another town hall. And at this point, I'm going to ask my council, if they haven't already, to unmute themselves and bring themselves on video. And we'll do a quick roll call and go through, and people can make comments or ask the panel additional questions. And so I always go in the order of that your faces populate my screen, and I've got Lisa Parsley. So Lisa.
It's twice now. I'm an introvert. I can do this. I can do this. I want to start by just thanking Kelly. You have brought us 4 moments in our lives, not enough time, and you have educated us. I think we've been talking about education and getting the truth of our history, maybe even writing our history books at some point of the history of the United States to reflect the true history and who really built this country. But I wanted to make sure that I really said thank you to you, because you're the one that this is your brainchild. This did not come from the council. You brought this to us. So thank you, Kelly. I really, really appreciate it. And I said this last time. Well, it's true. I would like to take credit for it, but I can't. It's yours. It's your baby. Last time I said this, and every time I come to one of these town halls, I'm thinking I can't get any better. I can't learn anymore. My brain is like leaking out my ears. I'm hearing repeating themes across the 4, so I'm just going to say a few, and then I'm going to have to think a lot on this. But the repeating themes is, like we heard last time and we heard today, we need to make room and then get out of the way and let other people lead, in particular the youth. And in particular, the communities that have been most impacted by this systemic racism. There's no doubt. I love what Les said. We've got to break down the silos for everything. It's all interconnected. Systemic racism, education, climate, poverty, homelessness, shelter, our economy, the whole thing is a big Venn diagram. And we have to break those lines down. I like what I heard tonight. I think it was Parfait that said we have to accept that our self-interest could be causing damage to the many. So the few and our self-interest in dealing with trying to protect that self-interest is harming many. But I also have heard it from Fernell and all of you that it's not really about us and them, it's about all of us, and that we will be stronger if we can figure this out and we can make sustainable change. I'm going to commit right now that I am on board for the entire time I'm on council, whether it's this time and I'm not elected again or I'm elected again. I am on board. I want this change and I will work for it, but I think we have to have the right voices in the room, and we need to make room and let them lead us in the way we need to go.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm going to go to Danny Madrone.
I'll echo those thanks to you, Kelly. This has been such an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful to have you at the city. And I'm grateful to all the panelists. It's really wonderful to learn from you. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we're failing, that we failed Black young people in our community. And I want to know how to make it right. So I want Olympia to be a place where young Black people know that they're loved. And I'm talking about, you know, the kindergartners, and even before that, early education, all the way up to our college community. We've got both Evergreen and SPSUC here. St. Martin's isn't far away. So I do have a question for you all, if there's time. How do we bring those youth in? The mayor early on was talking about how we're about to move into a process. Actually, Fernell, I really like how you framed it as a liminal space. That is one of my favorite terms. I want to make sure that we're bringing young Black people in to help to guide us. So how do we do that? Like, what are some very tangible steps we can make to show young Black people that we are listening, that we're ready to change, that we're ready to let them lead?
Thank you, Danny.
I'd love to follow up. Oh, sorry.
Sure, Fernell, yes.
Follow up later with you. I don't know if there's time now, but I'm just answering to say yes, and I'll always, and I'll talk to you later.
Excellent.
Awesome. I'll email you.
Thanks, Fernell. Clark Gilman.
Gotta find the button. Kelly, I am so grateful for 4 weeks of listening to 15 African-American leaders who've talked openly and honestly about the impacts of white supremacy and racism. And there are just so many places in these conversations where I have been just dope slapped. Like, I thought, I've lived in Black neighborhoods, I've worked in majority Black workplaces, and I don't know squat. So there's one thing I do know from meeting all these great folks is that there are folks each week who are smarter than me, better educated, better looking, and I've had an easier go of it. It's just truth, right? Last week we talked about there's evolution or revolution. And tonight was kind of an echo of that last week, saying, no, we're not going back to the same institutions, especially if those institutions were created to maintain a certain social order and economic pecking order. There's a coming out of this moment, and I'm going to Google liminal after this meeting, so I'll find out what that is. But this moment of pause is a chance to refuse to return to what we had. And the other thing I'm going to take away is I heard 2 threads in the conversation tonight. One was about empathy, heart, spirit, acknowledging the humanity of all of us. The other one is about the linkages between racism and poverty, and the fact that poverty and those social divisions are intentionally created to benefit a few. And I think part of our job is to keep explaining that we live in a world of abundance, not a world of scarcity, and that the competition is baloney, and that it's not a threat to give an equal opportunity to somebody who looks different than you. And I'm so grateful for your time. And I've been humbled by the courage of the panelists and my African-American friends of speaking up in this time so courageously about the tough situation. So thank you all.
Thank you, Clark. Renata Rollins.
Hi. Well, I want to thank you, Kelly, too, and all the panelists. This has been a really, I've just been sitting here very enthusiastically taking this in. I apologize, I was unmuted for part of it, so I was reacting really excitedly when I heard you, Fernell, talking about liminal space as well. Speaking my language, and I'm really, anyway, so I'm sorry that was probably obnoxious, so, but
I put it in the chat for you there in my blog. I put it in the chat so y'all can read. You're so funny.
Yeah. I mean, that's really where it feels like we're at, where we know the old ways haven't been working, and we know we're not going to get to the new way by using the same thinking, and that means like white institutional thinking. And so how do we change that the quickest is we go to the people who are most impacted by racism and other forms of oppression, and particularly racism right now. So I just to reflect some of what I heard and what I'm going to be carrying with me that you gifted us today in this talk. Saying that Fernell, when you talked about youth saying what they need, and that is essentially writing policy, and I think we see that potential in our community too. It's like when people of color can tell us what they need, and we can either get out of the way or help facilitate that. I think that would be a huge step in our organization taking anti-racist action, taking pro-equity action. I wrote down yes and always. I think that's so, and it ties to what I heard you say, Les. It's hard to call you Les. I was being a greener, but about like the zero-sum game that like, oh, we got to figure out like, well, we don't want, if we give some people more benefit, that's going to lower that is such an illusion, and we're done with that. And I really appreciate that articulated so well. That is over. That's over, and we're not going back. Let's see, I Parfait, when you talk about the youth saying that you older generations, white people, failed us and we want change now, and that there may be some disruption involved, that there's some innovation possible in that disruption. And I can't help but think that and part of your bio being involved in conflict resolution, and that respect that and knowledge that conflict can be a generative process if we have the courage to lean into it. So and that can be, that good trouble is good. It's good trouble. Just the theme over and over that time is up, and also on the topic of that we can't afford to be working and living in these silos. Excuse me. It just strikes me how many of our social problems ultimately are tied back to our history and legacy of racism in this country, and we've always had an opportunity to do it different, and it feels like there's a critical swell of energy and a critical understanding that we really have an opportunity that I think our organization wants to seize, and our communities are certainly ready to lead on. And lastly, Thelma Jackson, when I almost was tearing up when you said like in this conversation, being the education focus, that you're home, and the idea of making room, and it it makes me come back to what this conversation really is about, is belonging, and the question of who has been seen as belonging to the American story or the Olympia story, and who has been seen as not being a part of it. And that those of us who have been granted undue space have an obligation to everyone to change that, until race is no longer a predictor of life outcomes. Again, this has been, I've been very enthusiastic and yet very, very grounded in the knowledge that my inspiration and getting to feel like this joy of new possibility comes at the expense of all of you and all of our communities of color, generations of pain, and the knowledge that has given you. And I'm just, so that's really heavy, and that's what informs my accountability in this moment, is I don't get to go on feeling excited about possibilities for change if it's not for the benefit of people of color, communities of color, which is ultimately about uplifting all of us. So my focus is repairing relations, transforming through that, and unlearning. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Jessica Bateman.
Thank you. I'll make it quick. I, again, thank Kelly. This has been an amazing learning process, and thanking all of our esteemed panelists for your time, sharing your experience. I'm struck by every single one of these panels and the intersectionality of all of them that was mentioned, like how our justice system intersects with our school to prison pipeline, healthcare, economic opportunity. Someone mentioned redlining, like all of these issues intersect with each other and have direct consequences and outcomes on each other. And like you said, Les, we have to break down those silos. And as a person who's worked for state government and is in office, those silos are well established and have been there forever. And that's just how it's, it's one thing to say break down those silos, but it is going to take a lot of intentional work. And that's why this process of learning is so important for us and our community, because like it was said here before, the very first part of this process is learning and acknowledging that harm that has been caused. In order to move forward in that reconciliation process, you have to have that basic understanding, and that can't be rushed. And as was mentioned before with the 1619 project, this has been hundreds of years in the making. And so much of what you said is brand new information for me and brand new learning for me, like my council colleague, Clark Gilman said, which just demonstrates, like you said, that our education system has failed all of us. I think another thing that really stood out to me is that the system is working exactly as it was designed to, and that's not just our education system, it's our healthcare system, our criminal justice system. And I think what struck me, the comment that you made, Parfait, about how, I think you said in second grade that a student is already 2 grades behind. That's absolutely shocking and unacceptable. And we know that to be true. That was new information for me, but I'm assuming educators know that is
Like 4th grade.
4th grade, thank you. But also we know clearly that the school to prison pipeline is evident. We know that our criminal justice system is inherently racist. So these things and they haven't been fixed. And that's where, like you said, that disruption and innovation, I'm excited. I'm also gonna look up liminal because that's a new word for me. But I wanna close with what you started with, Parfait, which was hope and opportunity. And when a person's race and socioeconomic status has a huge impact on determining the outcome of their future, we are failing our students and we are failing our future, because when we fail them, I love that quote that you gave about the greeting of coming to a new place and asking, how are the children? Because they are our future and we have so much work to do. We do have an obligation as people that, for me, coming from a place of privilege, to do this work and to repair, like Councilmember Renata Rowan said. So it's been profound. I'm also enthusiastically learning, but also feel a strong sense of responsibility and obligation to get into this work. So thank you for being a part of this journey with us. I don't take that lightly. I know that this time that you gave us is really valuable and sacred, and I truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. So this is the hardest part about being mayor is I go, I put everybody else first, and then everybody's taken so many of the great nuggets, but I'll try and bring it back together. I know we're a little bit over our time. I do also want to acknowledge that we are already asking so much of our Black, Indigenous, people of color communities during this time, and you're probably very tired of answering the same questions that we should already know. So thank you for spending time with us today. There was a lot of questions that came in through the Q&A box that we were not able to get to. One of the ones that I was hoping we could think on is the inequity of, as we go back to school, some of the small private schools are able to open, and those are already children that are advantaged by being able to afford a private education, and yet our public schools can't. And so how are we going to make up that gap? But as well, just understanding that that they are all our children, and that we will profit or perish by their well-being is something I think is our overarching theme of this conversation. And then, sorry, I have to look. Okay, and I'm going to give you I'm going to close with the understanding of what liminal is. I looked it up, and it is beautiful. It's like the best word right now. And it is, a liminality is the quality of disorientation that occurs in the middle stage of a rite of passage when participants no longer hold their pre-ritual status, but have not yet begun the transition to the status they will hold when the rite is complete. And so that definitely, I've heard Renata use that word before, and I never looked it up, but thank you for, that is definitely where we are, but it's also a stage of hope and possibility, and that's what you've given us this evening. So thank you so much, and I'm hoping that we will meet again, either in the same space or back on Zoom. So thanks for everybody that tuned in as well, and talk to you all around, see you all around town. Bye.
Bye.